Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Also, thank you to everybody who is watching this in the future. My name is Sean Blanton. I am the Product Marketing Manager here at Mojo Networks. Really excited to talk to you today. The topic being best practices for cloud Wi-Fi in K-12. I was inspired by an article I read, although about a year and a half old. It was written in the summer of 2014. It talked about how still, even at that point in time, with all the talk about new innovations in the classroom, new initiatives that were all very centered around the digital medium as a form for teaching and delivering knowledge, that still 3 out of 5 schools across the country were still without proper Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, of course, being the central piece of infrastructure that is supporting so many of these initiatives. I was also inspired by my own personal experience. You know, I've been with Mojo Networks for about over 3 years now, most of my time being spent actually on the side of systems engineering. So being able to work with customers of all shapes and sizes and really coming to understand the movement and the desire for parting from older architectures of enterprise-grade Wi-Fi, moving into now cloud-managed Wi-Fi. So today, I wanted to talk about future-proofing. And in a larger sense, what I want to do is help define that term, which, like so many terms, has become a buzzword. It's something we all want, we're looking for, but I hear many different definitions, and a lot of people, despite the fact that they desire a future-proof network, aren't going through the necessary steps to really ensure that they receive one. So today, we're going to talk about what future-proofing is. We're going to look at the scope of Wi-Fi necessity within the school. So we're going to see all the different elements that where Wi-Fi is really driving new initiatives, and also in some cases, new initiatives are driving the need for Wi-Fi, so that we can really have a firm ground to stand on, so that ultimately we can look at the key attributes for what is a future-proof network. And how do we ask the questions to our Wi-Fi providers, be it someone like us here at Mojo Networks or your local technology partner who is interfacing directly with the end vendors. How do you ask the appropriate questions to ensure that your network is, in fact, future-proofed? So without further ado, let's start by it was actually born, and where most study has happened under this concept is within the AEC industry, which is architecture, engineering, and construction. Interestingly enough, this particular industry, because it combines 3 somewhat separate players working together to bring a project together, a lot of study has been put into understanding how do you future-proof that end project. And so as it relates to us in technology, we're going to look at it in 3 stages. The first stage is the most recent stage. It's codifying requirements of your current plans over the next 3 to 12 months. Now this must seem pretty obvious, right? We want to understand what exactly we are buying. So codifying requirements, though, is definitely an essential component. We're going to talk a little bit about some pitfalls around future-proofing, but understanding all the requirements that you need, every facet of your Wi-Fi investment is essential to making sure that what you get will solve your challenges today and will make you successful over the next 3 to 12 months. The most tangible time period from which you can deliver and create your projects. Also, the most tangible time period from which you can budget for those projects. It can be difficult sometimes to budget further than that. Now, for anyone out there who has either gone through or will be going through the E-rate process, the Form 470 forces this activity, which is great. It creates clearly defined rules for how to build your requirements, and it requires you to have those requirements be laid out in a very clear fashion. So this is really great, and this is already happening today. The next step, as it relates to future-proofing, is taking a step further into the future. So now what we're doing is we're looking at our current plans that we have defined for ourselves, what we want to do over the next 3 to 12 months, and now we're considering how they're going to evolve over the next 1 to 3 years. Because as hard as we want to, or as much as we want our system today to remain static, we set it up, we never have to worry about it again, it's going to work and continue to work forever and ever and ever, that's just not the case. And there's so many factors out there that influence, especially as it relates to Wi-Fi, this becoming this core piece of infrastructure, we need to take into consideration how our plans may evolve. For example, our current plan may be to enable Wi-Fi access in all of our classrooms. A fairly straightforward goal, and we may have different paths to get to that end goal. But if we consider that over the next 1 to 3 years, we're going to see a boom in our school's population. Perhaps we're going to be opening new academies, or rather new schools, new buildings. We're going to be extending into temporary schooling because we know that we have this larger group of students coming through. We have to consider what that means. What does it mean to get Wi-Fi into every room with that change coming? And that might be a change that we can expect, but we also have to be considering things that we may not expect. And that actually leads us to our third step of future-proofing, and now we're looking even further into the future. And now we're anticipating. So we can't ever know at this point how requirements will evolve or change, but we have to put ourselves through the exercise of anticipating how these things can change. And in this case, it may not be an evolution from where we started. It may be a completely separate approach to what we've been doing today. But rest assured, this doesn't just fall on you. This is an exercise between you and your Wi-Fi provider. And it's a collaborative exercise because on the one hand, only you really know what you need to get done over the next 3 to 12 months. You have access to your school, to the people of that school. You know what's happening in the district. You want to make sure that the requirements as laid out by other entities are being held through with your plans. And on the flip side, as it relates to anticipating the requirements over the next 2 to 5 years, well, this is where I have the seat of power because in my seat, I have the opportunity to look at districts across the country, in some cases across the globe. I also have access to information around how the industry at large is changing. So how's Wi-Fi changing, and how are ancillary technologies that influence Wi-Fi and subsequently Wi-Fi influences, how are they changing? You know, this is what I do. This is what companies like mine and Wi-Fi providers as a whole are looking to do. So this collaborative approach allows me to inform you, you to inform me, and collectively we get to the sweet spot where we can really build a strong platform that will continue to deliver over the next years and years and years exactly what you're looking for, and we'll be able to shift. We'll be able to anticipate changes and account for them and put you in a position to take advantage of them without serious burden. So what are some pitfalls of future-proofing as it relates to Wi-Fi? I have two that I want to call out in particular. The first is this idea of stretching. So you may think to yourself, future-proofing is the act of getting my system to move forward in time, to still function years and years from now. And yes, that's absolutely true. But what we don't want to do is stretch our investment with the assumption that what we have today will continue to function into the future without major change, without evolution. Because the fact of the matter is, as it relates to Wi-Fi, access points, Wi-Fi clients, and the applications that Wi-Fi clients are running through access points, these three major components of Wi-Fi are all changing rapidly, very rapidly. Ask any analyst if they felt that when 802.11ac Wave 1 hit the market, ask any of them if they anticipated the quick adoption, the movement to Wave 2. In 2016, we're talking about 802.11ac Wave 2, access points all over the market being pushed out this year, much, much faster than any analyst would have predicted based off of past trends. And client capabilities are also growing on an annual basis. Every year, new smartphones, new tablets are being entered into the market, and we're almost past that point where we're innovating the actual device itself. We know tablets exist and smartphones exist of all shapes and sizes, and now it's just about making them more and more powerful. So their capabilities continue to grow, and the applications that run on them are also expanding. Consider all the movement to cloud, the movement to apps on these particular devices. They're stronger, they're faster, they do a lot more, they're much more interactive, and as a result, if their requirements are expanding, clients need to grow to handle those. As clients grow, applications can grow as well. Overall access points need to adopt and need to change to account for that. So stretching a Wi-Fi investment is not the right approach. Thinking about what we have today, will it work a few years from now? We need to anticipate that change. The other pitfall that I see out there is focusing on a single attribute of Wi-Fi. And this attribute, it could be a feature or even a group of features. It might be an attribute like price, or perhaps a more conceptual idea like a management interface. If you focus on a single attribute, what happens is you're ignoring evolutionary considerations. You're ignoring what else is out there that might tap on Wi-Fi, and that's a problem. That puts you in a situation where your system is not future-proofed. If 2 years from now something changes, there's a new need for Wi-Fi in a different area, if you didn't account for that, focused on this single attribute, you may find yourself unable to utilize that new Wi-Fi feature in the future. The other aspect of focusing on a single attribute is that it doesn't stimulate flexibility or adaptability. And this is actually a key tenet to the study of future-proofing, because on the one hand, a system needs to be flexible. It needs to adapt to changes in the future that are unaccounted for. But the other thing that's really important here is that we need to have a system that can stimulate that flexibility or adaptability. Without a system that is multifaceted, that can scale and is reliable, and we're starting to tap on some of these major pillars as we're going to talk in the future of this particular presentation. Without those, we won't even know what we could do, let alone being prepared to adapt to those things that occur. So we want to avoid, when we're looking at future-proofing your Wi-Fi investment, of stretching that investment out and also focusing on a very singular attribute. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk now more specifically about the scope of Wi-Fi necessity within K12, because there's a lot to talk about. Some of this may be very top of mind for you, and some of these things maybe you're not even thinking about just yet. The first thing I wanted to talk about is students. We're going to look at this in 4 major groups. The first group being our students, and really the main thing to talk about with students is generally the one-to-one initiative. Getting students access to the applications, be it cloud-based or internally hosted, that they need to perform their duties, to complete their assignments, to gain knowledge, to be successful. And the one-to-one initiative is generally the most talked about initiative, getting every single student their own laptop or their own tablet or whatever machine they need to gain access to these. And in some cases, it's state-issued. In other cases, it's a BYOD initiative. So where we may be fortunate enough where our students have strong devices of their own, and we can leverage them to gain access to the applications, we'll often see that there's a mixture of in between. But the thing I want to really call out is that when you think about students and the necessity of students, it's very device-focused. So here, when we're talking about future-proofing, we need to future-proof the bits and bytes. Do we have enough coverage? Do we have enough capacity? Can we handle the number of clients that are on the network and will continue to grow onto the network? When we talk about teachers, I really wanted to think about digital learning initiatives. So with teachers, yes, teachers use devices as well, but really the focus with teacher initiatives is the need for that flipped classroom. So the flipped classroom, if you think about the growth of this particular initiative, the flipped classroom, of course, being changing that standard of having a single instructor with a classroom who is learning from that instructor in more of a lecture style, and flipping it around, having students engaged, looking for the information they need through various digital and non-digital mediums, with the teacher really coaching each individual student through that process. In 2012, according to a study, 48% of teachers had flipped at least one of their lessons, and only 2 years later, that number was up to 78%. This is a study done by Sophia. Also in 2012, they found that 73% of teachers recognized just the term flipped classroom, whether or not they'd done it or not. But then 2 years later, in 2014, that was up to 96%. So this is a real initiative, and this is really happening, and we're moving into the majority of classrooms that are looking to adapt this, whether it's for a single lesson or for multiple lessons or for their entire curriculum. And of course, the heart of this is Wi-Fi, because if students can't connect to the internet reliably, these initiatives fall flat. So we want to make sure in this case that we're accounting for these applications. Do we have the bandwidth capabilities? Can we support 30 students hopping on the network at the same time to watch a video from YouTube or from some other LMS that may be cloud-based or otherwise? Do we have the capabilities of accounting for 30 students doing all sorts of different things? So this is really important, and this is much more of an application focus. When we look at the district and the staff, you can look at this as more of an enterprise focus. And what I mean by that is, as it relates to either the district at large, so multiple schools, and this is really dependent upon how you manage Wi-Fi ultimately. Do you distribute it at a school level? Is there central management at a district level? But in either case, our faculty needs access to the corporate network, the quote-unquote corporate network, standard Wi-Fi that's protected, that allows me to control authentication through maybe a central authentication server, allows me to give access to local and cloud-based resources, allow me to also support a guest network. You're seeing more and more the need for guest networks in K-12 for a lot of different reasons. The number of visitors that are appearing in schools, when we think about it, we have parents, we have district leaders, we have other third parties that are looking at and interested in what's going on at the school level. And then the whole flip side, you have your vendors. All vendors that would run any system who may need Wi-Fi, maybe for troubleshooting, maybe it's for presentations, for training, all these different purposes where a guest network is necessary. And as you can see, even with these couple of examples, that guest network can be very varied. There can be a lot of different variables that go into play. And then, of course, online testing initiatives, which are continuing to grow. And here, if we're going to take a couple hundred students and put them in an auditorium, all have them flip their laptops on so they can take tests for a couple hours, you better believe that that Wi-Fi system needs to be reliable and scalable. It needs to perform fast, and we need to be able to resolve issues quickly should they ever arise. And then finally, we talk about facilities. And this is an area where we're seeing a lot of growth in Wi-Fi, and some of this is actually growth that is not yet being accounted for. With facilities, we're seeing a need for both security, and with security, we're talking about various levels of surveillance, so video cameras, motion detectors, proximity alerts. We're looking at device inventory. So everything we've talked about so far about issuing out devices to students and teachers and faculty, we need to have our eyes on that. We need to know that they're out there. Also, systems like door locks are all becoming smart. And these smart systems are all controlled over Wi-Fi. Facilities also has utilities management, so lighting and HVAC, also moving to these smart systems. They're much more efficient. They're easier to manage. They can save a lot of money. They have low total cost of ownership. And they're all being governed over Wi-Fi. So now our Wi-Fi system is not just about getting students and teachers online. Where most of the conversation is around that, we also need to start thinking bigger and wider and further into the future. And again, at the center of this is Wi-Fi. It is an essential service, a must-have. And this is why it can't be stretched. It has to evolve with the changing standards, the changing needs, things that we can anticipate and things that we can't anticipate. And because of that, it can't be cost prohibitive. It has to grow quickly and fluidly, and it needs to be dynamic and responsive wherever that need is. So we're gonna pause for a second. I want to throw a poll up there, and I'm really curious to hear from you guys. What are you anticipating, or maybe what are you not anticipating? You'll see pop up on your screen. What is a good scenario to anticipate over the next 1 to 3 years that involves Wi-Fi in your school? So we're really curious to hear what you say, and while we're delivering on that poll, I want to tell a really short story because I really like this story. It's from a customer of ours, and it really goes to show that despite the attempt to anticipate lots of different angles, there's always going to be something that's going to pop up that you didn't even think of. So we have a customer. They're actually based just outside of London in England, and I won't say their name, as you guys will probably understand why soon. But suffice it to say, this particular academy is fairly high-end, in a pretty high socioeconomic area. So a lot of times, the students that go there are, of higher means, and they have a lot of their own devices. So there's a big BYOD initiative. And the particular group that we were working with was looking at Wi-Fi for lots of different purposes. They were looking at it for classroom-based initiatives. As I just mentioned, there was BYOD. They wanted to enable guest networks for students and teachers. But they were also looking at security. They recognized that because of because of their status, because of the type of schools they were, they felt that they needed to have strong security, scanning for and identifying wireless threats, making sure that security was very top of mind. So they were really anticipating, and they were looking at Wi-Fi from a lot of different angles. Well, they install Mojo Networks in a test environment. They start to expand it throughout the academy. And what happens? Well, they get an alert. It's an evil twin. And an evil twin, for those of you who are not aware, an evil twin is an access point that is broadcasting the same wireless network that you broadcast. The goal of an evil twin is generally to trick the end user, to have them connect to your access point rather than the legitimate one, so that you can attack them, or you could do something else that's nefarious and malicious. And they found that not only was there an evil twin, but it was inside the school. And they searched for it, and they were able to leverage some of the location tracking services that we offer to find. And what did they find? Well, in a classroom, taped to the back of a freestanding chalkboard was a small little access point that had a cellular connection, and that access point was broadcasting a school's guest network. And what the student was trying to do when they ultimately found out who it was, they were trying to have other students connect to that network with the express intent of hacking them, of attempting to run techniques like an SSL strip to gain access to usernames and passwords. The student also expressed that they were interested in trying to steal credit card information. And this blew these guys' minds, because as much as they felt that from a security perspective they need to protect students from outside threats, they could never believe that there were also inside threats, that students may be attacking other students using this sophisticated technological attack. So just wanted to share that story. I'm a security nerd at heart, so I find it to be very fascinating and something always to consider. Okay, so let's talk about what are the primary future-proof attributes. What do we need to be considering when we are vetting Wi-Fi providers and trying to understand, are we moving towards a future-proof network? And there are 5 main attributes that I want to talk about today: reliability, scalability, ease of management, multifaceted, and security. Now, some of you are probably thinking, where does cost fall into this? Because certainly a future-proof network keeps costs low, and that should be a major contributing factor. And I agree with you. But the thing is, as it relates to cost, cost savings are typically found within these 5 attributes. And when you look at them, when we really start to dig deep and start asking the right questions, we're going to find ourselves lowering our overall costs, both from an actual dollar spent, but also all the opportunity costs that we'll be able to save as a result of really considering what it means to future-proof your network. So let's start with reliability. Now, I'm immediately going to contradict myself, because I do believe that all 5 of these attributes should be weighted equally. They're all very important in their own right. But I also believe that reliability is the most important one. So forgive me for that slight contradiction. But the point is this: if the system doesn't work, if it's not dependable, if you can't reliably deploy and manage a Wi-Fi system, then nothing else matters. Everything else falls to the wayside if the system itself, if the product platform is not reliable. And the big point I want to make right now is that fundamentally, reliability is delivered through architecture. And that's why today so many schools are moving to a cloud-managed Wi-Fi architecture. And that's why the very first question you need to ask is, how is the product platform architected? Cloud-managed Wi-Fi delivers a lot of benefits, and that's a topic for another webinar, what those actual benefits are. But suffice it to say, when you're looking at and you're vetting Wi-Fi providers, reliability first starts with the product platform, and the questions you want to start asking, and by no means is this list exhaustive, but the questions you want to be asking is how the product platform is architected. What SLAs exist for both the hardware and the software uptime components? So how do you know, and what's the promise? What are you actually promising to deliver me in terms of uptime? And again, looking at it both from the hardware and the software component. But also, what I would add as this as an addendum is to ask your provider, what are your real numbers? What are you actually delivering? Because in some cases, you may find that the SLAs, whether it's 4 nines or 5 nines or something in between, sometimes those numbers are hindered based on a lot of different factors, whether it's data center, service provider, or the actual product platform itself, or a combination thereof. But you may find that what that particular vendor is delivering can be much higher and refreshing, and it's good to ask and to know what that information is. What's also important is to ask what platform redundancies exist to prevent an outage. So the architecture conversation you can see here is very top of mind when we talk about reliability, because fundamentally how the whole system is architected, as I mentioned before, will drive this reliability. And the last question that I think is really, really important is asking, what do I need to do to ensure this high reliability? And here we're thinking about what actual resources and time and ultimately cost do I need to put forward to achieve high reliability? And the beauty of cloud-edge Wi-Fi is that this amount of effort on your side is very low, because these are the types of things that are being handled by cloud-managed providers. I think it's also important when you think about reliability to think about it from the perspective of the vendor and the provider itself. So this is both the ultimate vendor of the product platform, but also your local technology partner. What's your strategic mission within K-12 over the next 1, 3, 5 years? What does your support structure look like? If I have an issue, who do I call? How fast do they respond to me? That all falls into the concept of reliability, and also how well we work with my local technology provider. That question obviously targeted more towards the vendor itself, but it's important to know how well they're being supported, as much as you are being supported as well. And the next topic I want to talk about is scalability. And I want to frame scalability in the context of the overall Wi-Fi workflow. So as it relates to Wi-Fi, we see that the general workflow is really 3 major stages. The first stage being installation and configuration. This is the front-end work. This tends to be the majority of the work, really bookended at the front. Where monitoring and optimizing, this is the bulk of the overall life cycle, or rather the overall workflow. And then, of course, response and actions, these moments where we have to actually dive in and we have to take care of something. And I think this is important to think about in the context of scalability, because it allows us to frame our questions correctly. You know, for starters, as it relates to scalability, what does it take to install new access points? And this is important because installation and configuration doesn't just happen once. The first time it happens, especially if you have no Wi-Fi to date or if you're doing a complete rehaul, it's important to understand what does it take to get those access points up and running. From installation to fully functional, what steps are required? And that's both the physical installation and also the configuration workflow. How easy is it? And ease, as it relates to scalability, is important because you also need to understand what components that you need to install yourself. Again, here's where, as it relates to cloud-managed Wi-Fi, so many of these components are already stood up naturally, and it makes for a very scalable system, because when the components that you need to install are reduced to just your access points, it makes it so that more access points can be deployed in the same amount of time. And it also makes each instance of installation much faster. What's also important to understand as you think about the life of your Wi-Fi investment is understanding capacity plateaus. So what type of capacity plateaus should you anticipate? You know, for those of you who have experience with some of the antiquated architectures out there, like the controller architecture, for example, there are capacity plateaus. There's only so many access points a single controller can manage before you need another controller. And of course, as it relates to another controller, then you need a secondary controller to act as its failover. There's installation and there's costs associated with that, and your ability to scale is limited by those plateaus, at least the speed at which you can scale and the ease at which you can scale. So understanding what those plateaus are and what you should anticipate over the next 1, 3, 5 years is essential to future-proofing your network. And then, of course, what steps are needed to tune a growing network? So what does it take? Do I have a single place where I can manage all of my access points? And if I can do that, how easy is it for me, and how large can I get as it relates to tuning very specific areas of my growing network? And finally, in the response, the action, as it relates to scalability, we need to understand how you handle, first, an influx of unaccounted devices. So this is part of that anticipation. So we already know that every single student has at least one smart device in their pocket, most likely, a phone, perhaps a tablet. But a lot of them now today you're probably seeing are wearing watches, and those watches are Wi-Fi enabled. There's a lot of other devices that are continuing to grow that are Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled, and these devices have an impact on your Wi-Fi network. They have an impact on just how large it can get, because they may not be connecting, but they are certainly contributing to the noise in the air. So understanding how a system handles that influx is essential, because it's going to help understand just how large the system can scale. It's also important to understand how much time it takes to stand up additional capacity. So here, we're responding to those changes, and we need to know the speed at which we can now move back to the first step, installation and configuration. What does it take to stand up that additional capacity? Do I need to set up new management interfaces? Do I need to recreate configurations as a result? These are the types of questions that are really essential when understanding scalability in the context of future-proofing. Now I want to talk about ease of management. With ease of management, I really look at it in two different buckets. The first bucket is time. And the questions around here really revolve around, as the first question says, how much time? So how much time does it take to install and deploy each component? Can I add that into an equation? Can I get a really good understanding of if my first installation will account for 1,000 access points, and I anticipate that I'll need 100 new access points every single year for the next 3 years as a result of some changes in demographics, perhaps within the district, how much time does it take to install and deploy those components is a really essential piece, because 2-3 years from now, I need to know what it's going to take and how fast I can do that. So that, again, we ask the question, what does the configuration workflow look like? Because if I need to recreate configurations, if we are getting new buildings, and with those new buildings and putting new access points in, do I need to reconfigure them? Can they live off existing configurations? This is really, really important to understand. And that goes into our third question. How often is this repeated? Can I rely on, or can I utilize configurations I've created from the get-go and just stand up new access points to feed off of those? Or do I have to recreate those over and over and over again? How is that organizational structure built? So how much time should I also expect to spend on monitoring? Because installation and configuration, this is a really key step. But generally speaking, when that's done, we can rely on that configuration to stand for some time. So the monitoring, that's really key. If you're anticipating, or if you need to have no more than 10 minutes a week, or 2 hours a week, or maybe 5 hours across the month to dedicate to monitoring, it's important to understand if that expectation or that requirement can be met under the guise of ease of management, especially over the coming years where your team might be changing. And that brings us directly into the second point, which is resources. How many people do I need to be dedicated to Wi-Fi? And what skills are required? And we say here to properly install and monitor. So do I need somebody? Do I need to hire someone who has 2 to 5 years Wi-Fi experience? Or can I rely on my team who may not be dedicated to Wi-Fi, or may not have very much Wi-Fi experience at all? How easy is it for them to take on this activity? And installation and monitoring is really important, but we also want to talk about resolving issues, troubleshooting. What are needed to resolve level 1, level 2, and level 3 technical issues? Again, what people do I need, and what skills do they need to have? And then the third bullet there, I jumped over there real quick. What, if any, data center resources are needed? You know, the beauty of cloud-managed Wi-Fi is that we're really reducing the amount of overall hardware that is required. It's just your access points. So in many cases, your data center resources are pushed aside. They can be used for other purposes, or they can be dismantled completely, because we don't need to set up controllers and higher availability with backups. We don't need to set up other internal server systems that are going to support Wi-Fi directly. We don't need to account for the power, the cooling. We don't need to account for all those extra elements that come into play when we think about data centers. But you always want to ask that question. You need to understand, no matter who you're talking to, what resources are required. Okay, so let's talk about a topic. I say multifaceted. So what do I mean by that? Well, at Mojo Networks, we've looked at the industry at large. We've talked with our customers at length, and we've really recognized that as it relates to Wi-Fi, there are three primary workflows. There's Wi-Fi access, connecting clients to the network, Wi-Fi security, protecting those clients while they're on the network and nearby the network, and there's Wi-Fi engagement, which is talking to and engaging with those clients while they're on the network and after. And so what I mean by multifaceted, especially in the context of future-proofing, is asking whether or not the platform is well-rounded. Does the particular platform have various components to achieve success in a Wi-Fi access, in a Wi-Fi security, and a Wi-Fi engagement workflow? Do they have them? Do they consider what these multiple workflows mean relating to Wi-Fi? This is where we're really starting to look forward. We're thinking about, and we're not just considering the changes, the evolving changes, we're also anticipating new changes. And so it's really important to understand whether or not your platform, your Wi-Fi platform, provides a complete platform. Can it help me through these workflows completely, or does it require, or does it even support technology partners that might get me there? You may find yourself thinking about engagement or security or even some aspects of access that are just not needed today. I don't have the time to think about them. They're not a part of our current plans, our first 3 to 12 months, and that's fine. But if you believe that they may be a part of your 1 to 3 year plan, or if you can only anticipate that they will be at some point, even if they aren't clearly roadmapped, you need to understand how easy is it for us to turn those systems on and get access to that. And so this dives into the company itself. Is the company forward-thinking? Is the product platform anticipating and setting future trends? Do they have your best interests in mind? And are they helping you get to the point where you're prepared, no matter what that change may be? And so finally, the last major platform for future-proofing is security. It is so essential that the system itself is secure, but it's also essential that it's delivering good security. I mean, how much of what we do, especially as it relates to Wi-Fi, it's the gateway for getting students onto the network. We all know that CIPA compliance it should be top of mind. We're thinking about not only protecting students, but also achieving compliance. So we want to understand, as it relates to security, first and foremost, what does the platform actually deliver? Does it support my ongoing security needs? And is it practical to implement? Some of you may be from districts that are very large. Perhaps you have very sophisticated teams, and you're in a position where you guys can have a dedicated security team, or at least someone that has a bulk of their time dedicated to security, who has experience in security. I'm sure a lot of you wish that was the case, but it's you handling so much. But security is important nonetheless. So we want to understand if it supports those needs as a practical implement. Do I need more than just my access points to achieve and to succeed in my security program? And the third question, I think, is anyone who spent some time in the world of security, this is a really, really essential question. Does it actually do something? Or does it just check a box? Some of us were looking to check a box. And a lot of times it's because the first two questions are hard to answer. But understanding whether the platform actually does something, if it can deliver real security implications, is key. And it's a question that's not often asked because it's much easier to know that it's there rather than really exploring what it does for me. But again, understanding future-proof networks, that story I told before, without a real security system that really did something, they may have never known that they had issues with student-on-student hacking. So the question about helping solve real-world security challenges, in many cases, there are security challenges that are very specific to K12, protecting students and teachers, making sure that connections are secure, encrypted, student data is being protected. But there are a lot of other security challenges out there in the world that may actually have real implications to K12 that aren't specifically within that, within your industry. Thinking about how parents coming to pick up students are sitting in their cars. I'm remembering my time in high school, and they're sitting there. But today, much more than it was when I was in high school and when I was in middle school, those parents, I'm sure, are on their smartphone. they're looking out, they're doing work, they're answering emails, and perhaps they're trying to jump onto the school's Wi-Fi to help them out there. And if someone's in the parking lot taking advantage of that, that's a real-world security challenge that may actually be impacting schools that isn't being considered. And so the other aspect of security is platform integrity. This is really, really important, especially as it relates to cloud-managed Wi-Fi, because we're taking the management component, putting it in the cloud. We're taking it out of your data center off-prem. So is that platform secure? And how is it secure? And as importantly, how transparent is the provider in describing how it's secured? Can you ask really detailed questions about data flow? What flows in and out, and how is it protected? What information belongs to me, and how do I access it? What information belongs to you? How do you access it? This transparency is really essential, because without it, you might be able to read some high-level information about security, but if you don't understand really intently what is being protected and how, you're putting yourself in a position where your network is not prepared for the future. And you may find yourself in a situation where you're not ready to anticipate changes in the future. So platform integrity is as important a security topic as the actual security that the system delivers itself. All right, so we're getting close to the end of our time, so please give me just a couple minutes to tell you a little bit about Mojo Networks. Mojo Networks, we are a cloud-managed Wi-Fi platform. As I mentioned before, we really recognize that across all Wi-Fi needs, no matter what industry you're in, access, security, engagement are the three primary workflows. And so we've worked really hard to deliver a platform that provides a complete workflow for all three of these major pillars. So whether you're interested in access, security, or engagement, or any combination thereof, we have the set of features and technologies that are going to support you from start to finish without the need for third-party integrations and at a really, really great cost. I want to take some time as well to show you what we're currently doing as it relates to our K12 promotional pricing today. You'll see here that we look at the access point in the cloud as a single unified bundle. Our C65 and our C120, two of our more popular access points, and you can get a feel for just what that cost is on the right. If you're interested in this information, please reach out to either your local technology partner. You can reach out directly to your Mojo rep as well. We'll get you their contact information shortly. If you look in the GoToMeeting panel, you'll see that this promotional information, as well as some other documentation that we put together to help you as you're vetting your Wi-Fi needs, you can be found in the document section of the GoToMeeting panel. So I want to say thank you. We have time for a couple of questions, and we're going to look now to see which ones we can answer. And of course, if we don't have a chance to do so, we'll get back to you on a one-to-one basis. And while we're looking at that, one last question. Really interested to know what you feel is your biggest future-proofing challenge.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. As we allow everyone to answer this quick poll on their biggest future-proof challenge, I just wanted to also open it up for Q&A. You can submit any of your questions through the Q&A panel or the chat window and GoToMeeting. So I'll just give it a minute or two for some questions to come in here while people are answering that.
Yeah, and while we're going through it, just a couple of details from our last poll. So some interesting responses. We saw that of all the respondents to our poll, 100% felt that digital-led classes was a scenario to strongly anticipate over the next 1 to 3 years. But what's really interesting is that both student-led network security breaches and smart utilities management had about 75% of the vote. So certainly an anticipation for these two particular aspects of Wi-Fi, falling under security, and as it relates to smart utilities management, making sure that access is available at a much wider scale.
Great, thank you, Sean. One question seems to come in here so far. We have a question on how does cost come into play when considering security?
So costs coming into play with security, I think there's really two two things to think about. Let's actually take a step back here, and we'll use this as our backdrop. So on the one hand, delivering security. So if you're looking at a platform that actually delivers real security rather than providing you with a snapshot of what's going on, specifically as relates to Wi-Fi, we're talking about identifying and picking up rogue access points, making sure that, like the story we told, situations aren't occurring where Wi-Fi exists that should not exist, that's on-prem, that's being accessed. If you're utilizing a system that doesn't, deliver this accurate visibility into these types of systems, you may find yourself spending unnecessary time looking for these, vetting, we think we sees, as we say. So as it relates to cost, this is now lost time, lost resources being sent on sometimes wild goose chases to understand whether or not a flagged event is actually a real security challenge. And then, of course, there's a breach, which nobody wants to experience. We see breaches in the news all the time. They tend to be very focused on retail, but a lot of that just has to do with who's actually reporting breaches and the laws around whether or not breaches need to be reported. And schools have a lot of really valuable data. They have student data and teacher data, a lot of HR records that can be very valuable in a criminal network. So the cost of a breach is very, very large, and as a result, planning for a strong, secure network can significantly reduce costs as it relates to cost of breach, but also just time spent looking for real security issues.
Great, thank you, Sean. Another couple questions came in. One was around how friendly intruders are seeking to piggyback off a school's Wi-Fi network experience. Their inability to, let me rephrase it. How do friendly intruders seeking to piggyback off a school's Wi-Fi network experience their inability to access?
So if I'm understanding the question, we're asking perhaps what are we doing to, if somebody were to take advantage of a, piggybacking off of a network, what are we doing to prevent them from getting further, from diving deeper into that? So there's a couple of things that to consider. I think first and foremost, it's looking at the network as a whole and making sure that it's properly designed. So that's first and foremost. If we have good, strong encryption, if we're using strong authentication sources to prevent users from getting onto the network that don't have the proper credentials, that's step number one. And guest networks as a whole, they tend to be very focused on internet access. Guest networks can also be controlled from an access perspective, but it can have security implications. If we're significantly reducing time to upload and download, that is bandwidth rates on a per user basis, this goes a long way in ensuring good quality of service, but it could also go a long way in preventing certain types of activities that may occur on that network. Not to mention that very often guest networks are configured so that any given user on the network only has a direct line of communication with the gateway. So this is a really important security feature. Even an open network, we can put controls in place that would prevent scanning, sniffing, peer-to-peer activities. And again, this is good for quality service purposes, but from a security practice, it's going to prevent anybody sitting on that guest network from attempting to talk to another device on that network. So these are just some ways where we may be able to disable, limit the access of certain users. But I would also say that if you're looking at trying to keep these users off the network, what some of my customers actually do is on a regular basis, and by regular I mean every week or maybe a couple of weeks, they monitor their dashboards. They have reports that are being generated, and what they're seeing are breaks in trends. They're seeing certain devices that are more prevalent than others, that are using more bandwidth than others. And as a result, they may flag those devices. And by flagging them, or perhaps even banning them, you can prevent them from connecting to the network altogether. And our, the Mojo platform specifically will control that, both from access controls, but also if given access, our security platform can actively keep clients off of your network through a variety of techniques, both on the wire and over the air.
Great, thank you, Sean. And just another question actually came in, and I thought I'd address this to all the audience members. But there was a question coming in if there's additional webinars coming up in the future that will go more specifically over the actual management console and features of Mojo Networks. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we have quite a few webinars that are going to be posted probably within the next day or two, and 2 of them are coming up in early March. So on March 3rd, that's actually about to be posted today. We will be reviewing the future of cloud Wi-Fi, and more specifically Mojo Networks as a solution, and all of our features. And we also have a webinar coming up on the 8th of March, and that's featuring Qualcomm as well as a co-presenter. And they're talking about their new chipset and a lot of those features that will be playing into our C120 Wave 2 device. So if anyone is interested in those, you can go to the following website that I'm posting here in the chat window, mojonetworks.com/webinars. I can also send those to anyone on the call who is interested. And just to follow up, I wanted to share the final poll results before we wrap this up. So everyone had answered, what do you feel is your biggest future-proof challenge? And it was an even split. About 30% of the responses were all allocated between each of the responses. So it looks like a third of the attendees are concerned about that they're limited by an inability to scale quickly. Another 30% find it difficult or complex network management. Again, 30% for inflexible capabilities.